Alright, BobalosRex here, and it's finally time. I'm gonna talk about the Elves of Quel'thalas. I'm gonna talk spoilers for Midnight, FYI. I'm gonna be talking about what's going on in Quel'thalas in Midnight, because that's where we're going. But I'm gonna recap the history. I'm gonna talk about how things have been, since we returned, like the state of things when we returned. And then what's going on, like what do we do, and then what do I think's gonna happen next for the Elves of Quel'thalas. So let's get into it. So first, let's get through the brief history. Now, if you don't know, High Elves used to be Night Elves, alright? Then when this all happened, they were exiled. Now, some went over there. Some were still over here, technically. Highborn. Because at the time they were Night Elf Highborn. And then our buddy, Dathramar Sunstrider, said, nope, I'm leaving. Woo! All the way over here. Alright, then he was hanging out over here. And then they found their way into these sacred lands of the Amani, but this wide open territory that they hadn't used, and built Silvermoon. And Quel'thalas became Quel'thalas, the land of the High Elves. They took it. We took it. Blood Elves took it. All right. It is what it is. Then, so that was 10,000 years ago, right? And that was Dathramar Sunstrider, all right? Cut to 2,800 years ago, so 3,000 years-ish, when we're going to start talking about ages. But yeah. Thornton, some human, all right, starts doing some stuff, right? This human, we're not going to talk about him too much, but this human unites the scattered human tribes. Alright? And are like, hey, the trolls are going to be the main problem. So he's like, yo, me, elves, humans, elves, team up versus trolls. Elves are like, fine, we'll do that. So they obliterate the trolls. Alright? But this was also when we got our first ranger general that's a Windrunner. So the elves that participated in the troll wars, because this is going to come up later when we're talking about some, were Anasterian Sunstrider, Talanas Windrunner, and then we got Thornton and the humans versus the Amani trolls. Now, man, I forgot to look up the name. I'll have the name when I talk about the Amani, but the troll leader was a specific troll leader, and it wasn't Zul'Aman. Some things are confused about that, but the troll wars, the ones that we talk about, the true troll wars, not just war with trolls, is 2,800 years ago when the humans and the elves combined and basically ganked the Amani. They tricked them. They fell into the trap. All right? So that was so long ago. So that all happened. Right, so that's the troll wars. Now, cut to, I think it's like, we're in the year like 42, 44. So 44 years ago, Dark Portal, right? Dark Portal opens. Now, again, you're like, why is this relevant to the elves? We'll get there. So Dark Portal opens, orcs doing all this stuff for the humans. Elves, I don't care. Don't give a fuck. Not really. Some may care. Right, so humans fight, lose. Now they're all up here. Now they're like, yo, elves, these orcs are going to be your problem. The elves are like, maybe. Then the orcs started to kind of be their problem because they were teamed up with the trolls. So it's like, okay. So that's when we get. All right, so this would be the second war. So the first war had played out. Now the second war, early on, just probably before it kind of started, seems to be when Illyria, Sylvanas' and Varisa's mother, and Lyrith would be killed during the Second War. But that is when they lost their mother, the Windrunners. All right, FYI, during the Second War. And that is also when Sylvanas would become Ranger General. And then we have the Second War would almost directly lead into the Third War, which would begin not too long with Arthas destroying the Elves. So we had the Second War, where the Elves combined with the humans and beat the Orcs and Amani, but that is also when Sylvanas became Ranger General, and Illyria left, decided not to be Ranger General, and was like, no, I'm going to leave, and I'm going to go fight the Orcs. So she goes off and fights the Orcs. All right? Then we're left with, FYI, I want to make note of this, Anastarian had been the king since the Troll Wars. Or there is another Anastarian, but that seems to be the same Anastarian. They could change it, but that's the same Anastarian. And now Quel'thalas is like getting up there. So then we lead into the Third War, and that's when Arthas does his thing. The Scourge attack Quel'thalas, and then Silvermoon is destroyed. Sylvanas is killed. 90% of the Blood Elf population wiped out in the Third War. All right. Elves, High Elves, got obliterated. Now, there were some still High Elves scattered all around, and then the remaining High Elves of Silvermoon became the Blood Elves. Under Quel'thalas, his father Anastarian knocked out, dead, killed. King Tyrannus dead, so Northern Lordaeron looking very different. Sylvanas now undead, leader of the Forsaken. Quel'thalas now obsessed with power and vengeance. And then he goes on his mission to Outland. Lotharimar left over here to be regent. All right, with his Ranger General Haldoran and Romath doing their thing. All right. So that's the end of the Third War. All right. Cut to World of Warcraft. All right. Base World of Warcraft. Sylvanas is in the Horde. The Elves are doing their thing up here. Not a part of World of Warcraft. Cut to Burning Crusade. Quel'thalas in Warcraft 3 had left to go to Outland. That is one of the things I said had been the thing. So during Warcraft 3, Quel'thalas is in Outland. Lotharimar, Thrawn, and them are just hanging out here unaffiliated. All right, with the Alliance or the Horde. At the start of Burning Crusade, Sylvanas helps the Blood Elves be pulled in to the Horde. Quel'thalas sends a Naru back for the Blood Elves to siphon and use the Holy Light. And there's a big thing. I forgot. So I should specify this. So when Dathromar Sunstrider, right, left 10,000 years ago, right? The reason why he had he had a vial of the Well of Eternity, which is a well of arcane magic and Titan Azeroth, Titan blood. And I think a little bit of extra juice in the Well of Eternity. But let's just say they got a vial of the Well of Eternity. They head over here. Dathromar made the Sunwell and then grew his city around it. All right? On Amani land. So everything's always been about the Sunwell in Warcraft 3. The undead attacked because of the Sunwell. All right? They put Quel'Thazad's body in the Sunwell to revive him into an evil lich and corrupted the Sunwell. All right. Again, my lore recaps are scuffed, but let's get back on the same page again. I had to get the Sunwell in there. So we got the Sunwell. We got a busted city. We got the Blood Elves joining the Horde because Sylvanas is in the Horde, and Windrunners are a big deal to Blood Elves. and High Elves. Alright? So, we got all that stuff that has happened, right? Cut to Burning Crusade. Quel'thalas goes bad, alright? We have to fight him in Tempest Keep. We turn out taking a Naru and doing that stuff, not bad, or not good. So, Quel'thalas, not dying in Tempest Keep, deals with demons, and goes to corrupt the Sunwell again and use it to bring in Kil'jaeden. But alas, Valen, the Naru that was taken, Muru, Valen cleanses Muru and uses it on the Sunwell. And now, after Burning Crusade, we now have a Sunwell that I'm just going to real quick sum up everything that happened to the Sunwell. So, Well of Eternity water put into sacred Amani land now creates Sunwell, right? There wasn't anything here before. I don't think, unless they changed things, there was anything else here before. All right, other than the Sunwell. So, Sunwell made. First thing that happened to the Sunwell after like 10,000 years, some dead dude gets thrown in it and turned into a lich. Not great. All right. Second thing to happen to the Sunwell. Dude comes back with demon magic, tries to summon a demon through it. Doesn't work. We stop him, and then we put a Naru crystal in it, infusing the Sunwell, not just with the arcane that it was before, the Titan blood, primordial magic that it was before. You know, it's still got, I still think it's got the dirty things in it, but not as much. But it gets purified by the light. And now the Sunwell is this fount of arcane and light power. Remind you of anything? Anyways. So, that is the end of Burning Crusade. And the Elves, since then, 17 years ago, have just been chilling. You know, basically thriving, you know, helping the Horde here and there, sending their people. Had some issues in Dalaran. Y'all know. Had some issues with Dalaran. But the Elves of Silvermoon, thriving. Alright. Lothamar got married not too long ago. Great stuff. Alright. Now, we've summed up I think I got most of the history. Y'all may say, oh, you missed this thing. Probably. But that is the history of the Blood Elves for the most part. Now, what's my history? So, first I was a Tauren, then I was a Blood Elf. I played a Blood Elf since Burning Crusade, so Blood Elf stuff is very important to me. So, returning home was a big deal. After 17 years, we are returning to this city. But y'all have seen, those 17 years have actually been pretty good to the Blood Elves of Quel'thalas, right? Now, not too long ago, there were a group of Blood Elves that were like, yo, I want to be in the Void. And they went, I'm going to go hang out in the Void. And then we got the Void Elves. We got Illyria. We had the Blood Elf Heritage Armor where we came back and they were like, the Dead Scar is healing. It may never heal fully. And then apparently it healed just fine when you put a road on it. That's the key, right? Dead Scar, right? The Blood Elves are like, what the fuck do we do with this Dead Scar? And someone was like, yo, what if we just paved over it? Boom. Boom. That's the key. That was the key all along. Just pave over it. So, Silvermoon, Reborn, amazing return. Blood Elves have been thriving, right? But then, guess what? We finally get to see the Blood Elves. We get to see how great they've been doing. Apparently. I mean, look at this. It turns out they're getting attacked again. So, let's get into it. So, midnight. Xal'atath's like, you elves and your well are doing too good. I'm gonna attack. So, we got Liadrin coming in with Lothamar. Alright, these OGs coming in and being like, Sunwell, we need your help. Lothamar's like, I can handle this. But Liadrin's like, yo, we need help. So, cut to midnight. Liadrin's sending us holy messenger shit. Player character, you're our only hope. we are like, all right, we lock in, we head to Silvermoon, right? And then we do all this stuff here. I'm gonna start flying around. This is a live action lore rant. We getting into it. So we come over here, we start at the Sunwell, and we help the Sunwell. But one of the things is interesting about the Sunwell is we're kind of losing. We're kind of losing. Tranquillien's getting nasty and all that stuff. Liedrin's like, yo, we just got to pray to the Sunwell. And then she prays to the Sunwell, and the Sunwell's like, yo, the Void's attacking. I'm going to shoot a laser. So the Sunwell shoots a laser. And there's a lot of comments about never seeing the Sunwell act like this. All right? And that's what's very interesting to me. Right? Clearly, we've never seen the Sunwell fighting before. And it has to do with the Naru stuff in it. Right? And I feel like in later lore rants, the Naru stuff about it is going to come back into play later. But that's kind of the gist, right? So we help that. Sunwell does most of the work. You know, we're just killing mobs. Sunwell blasts it. And now we're left like, yo, what are we going to do in Silvermoon? All right? What are we going to do to stop Zul'Aman? So we all head back. And then that's when we, the player character, are sent to explore. Now, as you can see, Sunstrider Island Isle is looking phenomenal, right? Basically integrated into a port. Like, look at this. I like how this is double connected. They're like, yo, it's so close. This is now our port. Bada boom, right? Perfect port there. You even got this sneaky little canal here that you can get little ships through. I like it. And you got the new Falcon Wing Square, no ruins. Remember me thinking I wanted to go into ruins? Well, the only thing you get to do out here, and I'll talk about it now, is run around a Blood Elf College. And we'll talk about the dungeon real quick. So, Murder Row, since we're in the city, has some fell smuggling going on, right? And you basically get to team up with Demon Hunter Batman and sort it out. But what's interesting, and I want to bring this up now since we're here, is you find out these shipments, and this conspiracy goes all the way up, right? It's framed as, oh, the criminal underbelly is causing this. It's funded by a wealthy aristocrat. Surprise, surprise. And then all these fell relics, which is interesting to me, these fell relics are coming from a very interesting place. Suramar. Alright, well you think, oh, that is a place for fell relics, but then there's also this delve, which sends us to the Archway. Now, the people in the Archway are Xal'atath affiliated, which means Xal'atath is sending some people over to Suramar for reasons, which is going to be interesting, I think. I was supposed to talk about this at the end, but yeah. Is she going after the other wells? Right? Is she going after the other well? The night well? Alright, we'll have to see, because there is a pillar of creation there. But anyway, so Nightborn are mentioned, and while I'm here, right? I'm not at the right village, but let's go to the village while we're talking about some of the stuff going on here. So we head over to this village over here. And we got Nightborn in Golden Mist making wine. So we got Nightborn and Blood Elf winemakers up here in Golden Mist. And Golden Mist is one of the villages thriving. And like I said, this is basically Nightborn Blood Elf village. And then there's a later village that is Void Elf. Alright. But let's keep talking about, let's get back to the campaign. So we got to figure out how to help Silvermoon. And early on, he sends us dealing with the Light Bloom problem, because one of the things that has happened, right? So when the Sunwell did its thing, right? It activated certain plants that have been growing in Eversong for a while, right? So in Eversong, since Burning Crusade, Light Bloom has been popping up. All right, and it's this sort of light plant, right? This, okay? Now, once the Sunwell did what it did, right? At the beginning, at the intro, all this stuff started going wild. All right? So much so that we find out that it completely took out a whole city over here. So, Sun Crown Village ain't good no more. Alright, this village did not do well, and it seemed to have happened relatively quickly. Alright, so the Light Bloom is one of the things we deal with, and the person who we deal with it with is one, Haldoran, alright, Haldoran Brightwing, and our buddy Orwena. Alright? So, we do all that stuff with Orwena and Haldoran, learn what the Light Bloom is and how it's affecting Silvermoon. And then we head over to here. This is basically where we learn about the Light Bloom. We head to Fairbreeze Village, which Fairbreeze Village is the pop-in place. Alright? Look at this fancy tree they got going on. They really expanded upwards. And then we got Sarthariel's Haven over here, and this is the big party. This is literally the renown area, so this place is gonna be huge. Now, you know how much lore we're gonna get at a party is gonna be up there, but yeah, this place has been popping off. There is a harbor over here, and there's some shady stuff going on at the harbor, but all these red mobs here are just because of, like, the quest line. This harbor is still fine. It's not like enemies have taken it over or anything. It's just some pirates hanging out here for a bit, but then we sorted. So this area, thriving, right? But then, yeah, like I said, we find out that the woods down here, remember the burned forest? I remember talking about it, seeing what had happened to it. Well, the light bloom has really helped it. All right, but Golden Mist Village happened to be safe from the Light Bloom, but Sun Crown Village was not. Next up, so after we do the Light Bloom stuff, we actually go to a place I really like. All right, so we head down into what used to be Golden Mist, used to be the Ghostlands 2. We head down to Tranquillien, and we go to help our buddy Umbric. Alright? Our best buddy Umbric. Okay? Because the Void Elves have kind of returned, but they're at arm's length. Alright? Lotharmar seems to be a lot chiller with a lot of the Void Elf characters. But, of course, we keep them at arm's length. Umbric is stationed up over here in Tranquillien. The rest of the Void Elves are actually in Windrunner Village. Okay, so that's going to be very interesting when we talk about that. But here's Tranquillien. We come over to Tranquillien, and everything seems fine at the start. We go investigating the normal spots around Tranquillien. We go investigating Death Home. Okay, so something's afoot in Tranquillien. We go investigating, and it turns out there's a cult. A cult of the Twilight Dagger has started, and Tranquillien has been engulfed with it. And we figure it out through some detective work, and we boot them out of Tranquillien, and we send them packing. I do like that the Tranquillien quest ended in Death Home over here, but we find out that the Twilight's Dagger has basically taken over the ruins of Death Home. Now, Death Home having been built on World Tree ruins, unless they, not World Tree, but a big tree, a great tree ruins, may be relevant, but I haven't seen much about it. But here's the interesting part about this area. There's level 90 mobs. So clearly we're coming back over here and there's a delve there, but aka Death Home, more like Death Ruins, but now is full of Twilight. Alright, so we do all that stuff for Tranquillien. Now, if you head over here, we do some more stuff. We hang out with the Void Elves over here, because I did mention this, you do head over here when you're investigating, and you can see some Void Elves hanging out here. Also, I found a book from Darkon Drathier here. Alright. But he's dead. I haven't seen anything from him. But what I did see was a lot of Windrunner. Now, Windrunner Spire. Is there stuff going on here? Yes. Is it crazy lore intensive? Not the most. It's catch-up, right? One of the great things about this dungeon when I did it was it provides a lot of context about Windrunners. Alright? You learn about Illyria, you learn about Sylvanas, you learned about Verisa, and you learn about their mother and the family and their brother. And you basically cleanse the tower. So if you look over here, you look at all of Ghostlands, there is one part that keeps this aura of ghost. Alright? And it is Windrunner Spire. Well, at the end of the dungeon, and I don't know if this is going to reflect, it doesn't reflect in game right now, but when you're done with the dungeon, it lightens up. I was very surprised at that. But that's the case. So, at the end of Windrunner Spire, the dungeon, the Ghostlands, for all intents and parts, are fine. Now, there is an interesting side story going on over here. The Naga, alright, when I was talking about Suramar shipments, there is another faction of outside elves doing shipments to and from Quel'thalas, and that is Naga. So, we see them over here. Alright, taking mana and some princess lady kind of skimming off the top. Alright? So, she's skimming off the top here. We stop her and stop her sending mana out to the Great Sea. But up here, remember the pirates I was talking about? They were also helping out the Naga here. So they also were having Naga take shipments of mana, you know, out to sea. And again, I know they said no Naga, but clearly they're involved and they're doing something. Now, will Ashara and her consolidating all this magic, what is she doing it for? Would be the big question, but we'll have to see. I don't see it. They don't make it a big deal, and other stuff becomes a big deal, so I definitely don't think it's immediate, but they are up to something, and I'm excited for it. All right, we are seeing hints of pretty much every elf but one. All right. So, after that stuff with Umbric, Tranquillien, and all that, he's set on finding a way to the Void Storm. And honestly, we do kind of need to find a way to the Void Storm. Okay? But Eritor and us are like, yo, we got to check on Golden Mist Village, and surprise, surprise, yeah, it was obliterated. And we have some other stuff going on here as well. The Amani are taking the Light Wood. Alright? So, as the Light Bloom is coming in, the Amani are like, yo, we're going to take advantage. And they are up here. And they are chopping the Light Wood. Alright? And using it for their weapons. At the behest of Zul'Aman, that's when we first kind of meet him. As we head into, we head up into this tomb. We meet Zul'Aman. I'm gonna walk through this tomb because we are gonna get into money next week. But I do think this Lightwood Zul'Aman stuff is going to be extremely relevant. All right, and playing through this again just felt so good, man. You had to find the mystery and be like, oh, which way do you get out? And it's like, I know the way out. I've been here before. And then, you do all this good stuff. And it was really nice. But basically, Zul'Aman's over here for Lightwood. We go push back the Amani. Classic Blood Elves kick the Amani out of their own land. And then we head out. And we head to Amani Pass. Now, the thing at Amani Pass is I guess it's going to become like a whole ass incident. But Eritor is like, yo, Tranquillien, we beat him. We kicked them out. Why are we like continuing? And Tranquillien's like, no, we got to continue attack. Destroy all the enemies kind of dealio. So we push them back. And then in a moment of defiance, Eritor steps in front of a strike meant for Zul'Aman. And unless we see something about it later, because I do need to do those quests, Zul'Aman's just like, sweet, thanks, I'm out of here. Haha, you elves fight. Elves and humans fight. But yeah, so Eritor runs off, and we will be going to talk to him, because when you get the continuation, you have quests to go talk to him, quests to go to Harandir, quests to go to Amani. Now, Liadrin is left over there, getting ready to deal with the Amani in one way or another, because the Amani are hurting, and Lotharmar, unlike Tranquillien, is like, yo, maybe we can work with them, because they had seemed to be fighting the Void and the Twilight Cult and stuff like that. All right. So, as you can see, in the last 17 years, basically the last 5, they've done a lot of recovery work. Since the elves have not been at war, they've done a lot of work, all right, over the 17 years. And they got more to do in this new expansion, already starting off with new problems. But I actually see a really bright future. With all this tree and nature stuff, with Haldoran and stuff, I can see Blood Elves getting maybe some new combos coming up. Alright? As we fight back to save Silvermoon. I do think we will save Silvermoon. Now, the Sunwell may change, and we'll talk about that in a much later lore rant when we get into outer space. But the Elves will endure. Alright? Now, there is one thing I said I was going to talk about, and I haven't really talked about that. And let's just sit right up here while we do it. So, Elf Ages. Alright. Elf Ages. We really need to talk about Elf Ages. Okay? So, I've been doing a lot of research when I was doing this lore rant. And if you go to look up like Sylvanas or any of their Windrunners' ages, or even Liadrin's age, you get this 2,800 year number. And that ain't right. Alright? Liadrin, Lotharmar, and probably even Quel'thalas, Sylvanas and her sisters for sure, none of them were in the Troll Wars. The Troll Wars was between Anastarian, Quel'thalas, Windrunner. We know that those two were at the top of the elves at the time. And like Thoradin. This is like ancient. Like this is 2,000 years ago. For elves, 2,000 years. Like I guess for Anastarian, it may be not that long. But it was probably early in his tenure. Alright. And the reason why we get this 2,000 year, why some people think that Liadrin, Lotharmar, and Sylvanas and Illyria were in the Troll Wars, because come from this change in the blood of the Highborn, where the Zul'Jin stuff was supposed to happen during the Troll Wars, but it didn't. Zul'Jin, trolls don't live that long. High Elves live long, but not as long as Night Elves. So, I've been doing research. Now let's just get into my research, because I'll talk more clearly about that. So, Dathomir, we know, was the Sunstrider 10,000 years ago. Anastarian, we know, was the Sunstrider 2,000 years ago. 2,800 years ago. Alright? Quel'thalas is the direct descendant of Anastarian. Anastarian had Quel'thalas. So we know there's at least one generation of Sunstrider between the Troll Wars. Okay? So, yeah, you would think that the other elves could be as old as Quel'thalas. But wait. That is if Quel'thalas may have been born at some point between Anastarian. But anyways, Windrunners are different, though. Let me talk about Windrunners. So, we know Quel'thalas from the bow lore in the Legion artifact bow. Quel'thalas was the Windrunner 2,800 years ago. Okay? It doesn't say he died in those Troll Wars. Now, if you look into the Sylvanas novel and Windrunner content, there is an Illyria 1. Okay? The Windrunner sisters that we know, their mother is Larissa. She was a ranger general. Larissa's mother's name was Illyria as well. So, now we have Quel'thalas, Illyria 1, and Larissa. Okay? Of Windrunners. Okay? And the Windrunners picked the eldest Windrunner. So most likely the first Illyria could have been like a sibling to Quel'thalas. Alright? But at the moment, I'm just going to say maybe Illyria 1 was Quel'thalas' daughter. Larissa was Illyria's daughter. And then Illyria was Larissa's daughter, the Illyria we know. So that's at least 3 generations. Alright? So, Lotharimar talks about him being friends with Sylvanas. And them being, like, young-ish together. Same thing with Liadrin. So I think Lotharimar, Liadrin, Sylvanas are about the same generation. Alright? Illyria's a little older, Varisa's a little younger, and then Lyrath's a little younger than that. Now, there is a line by Lotharimar that talks about being in battle with Sylvanas for a millennia. Respecting Sylvanas for a millennia. That is the only line that gets us a decent date on these Windrunner ages. Because, like I said, if you look online and you see that 2,000 year number, there is no fucking source for that other than a retcon. Not even a retcon, because it wasn't published with that having been the time frame for that. But yeah, no way did the Zul'Jin thing happen during the original Troll Wars. Zul'Jin was not there. Alright, so the only line that gives us roughly the Windrunner sister ages is that Lotharimar line for millennia. So, in my opinion, the way we see the Windrunners written, I think Sylvanas is about 1,000 years old. Alright, give or take. Illyria a little bit older, Varisa a little bit younger, and I'm gonna say rural elves seem to have a lower life expectancy rate than city elves, because Quel'thalas, you know, Anastarian lasted at least almost like 3,000 years probably. Dathomir, there is one generation between Dathomir and Anastarian, or 2 generations between Dathomir and Anastarian. So Dathomir maybe about 3,000 years-ish. Then his son 3,000 years-ish, and then that gets us to a nice little spot for Anastarian. And then for Windrunners, you see the multiple generations play out in only that 2,000 years to 3,000-ish years. So I definitely think, from my research, Sylvanas is about 1,000 years old. And the Windrunners are. Because they were not a part of the Troll Wars, but their families would have talked about it and been a part of it as a big deal. So I had to talk about that elf age stuff because I was seeing people going crazy. Why don't these people know that? And here's the thing. We don't know how elves mature, right? We do have a good idea. We know they're not like Grogu, right? There isn't an elf toddler going like, I'm 34, right? Arathor isn't looking like a toddler. So we know they kind of mature like humans in a way, because we see Salandria, the little elf girl that we get in Burning Crusade for the Orphan Quest. She was born on Outland. And now we see her as like a teen. So we know elves mature quickly and then like level out. Okay? But I do feel, especially in Elven society, if you're like 100 and you're talking to like 1,000-year-old elf, that elf's going to call you a child. But the reverse is kind of silly too, and I was talking about this, right? So, if an elf looks as old as they're going to be at like, say 50, let's take a Lotharmar, right? Say Lotharmar as an elf is 50 and kind of looks a little bit like 40, 50-ish. Imagine a human being like, what, you don't know this thing? Aren't you like 1,000 years old? And then that elf has to be like, bro, I'm like 30. I'm like 40. You know, I'm not that old. Just because elves can be 1,000 years doesn't mean every elf is 1,000 years, you know? So I just had to talk about that. That's basically it for this lore rant. I know I spent so much time charging this one up. I hope it was worth it. I had a good time coming back to Quel'thalas. I love the Blood Elves. I love their story, all the stuff they've been through. I like that we're getting... The Nightborn are involved. For anyone saying Nightborn stuff isn't involved, why do we got a delve that goes back to Suramar? Why are Fel relics from Suramar being pumped in, right? Why are there Nightborn Vintners in Golden Mist Village, right? We got Void Elves over here. Again, the only elf that seems missing is the Night Elves. But, you know, in a later lore rant, we may see that there's a connection, at least, to the Night Elves through a later zone. And I definitely think the next couple of 0.5, 0.7 patches will be picking up on some of the themes of Quel'thalas, of Eversong. Alright? Even though I think the further the expansion gets in, we will get further away from the elf stuff. I think the 0.5 and 0.7 coming up may be elf based. At least giving us a little extra stuff going on here. Or at least I'd like to see it. Because there is some stuff going on here that I want to see more of. And I can see lead into other stuff. Especially, like, what is the Naga doing with... What are they doing? What is Ashara doing with the mana? Like, all the arcane that she's taking. Right? And is it in conjunction with Xal'atath? Because what is Xal'atath sending Twilight Blade to Suramar for? Right? I would have thought it was related to the Fel when I first saw this. But then we go there to fight Twilight Blade, and I was like, huh? So, you got Fel stuff coming in from Suramar. You got Twilight Blade going there. Something else may be going on the Broken Isles. You know, we just came back from Legion Remix. Is the Broken Isles going to get involved in something soon? We know we need Nightborn Demon Hunters, right? Fel relics coming from Suramar. I wonder who could be there to watch out for Suramar. The Night Elf Demon Hunters? Because we see that. We see Erator working with Demon Hunters. And we work with Demon Hunter Batman over here, Belith. I'm excited. I'm excited for the elf stuff. And I think we're going to be getting some elf stuff in the 0.5, 0.7 as we move away into the next area. And we'll talk about that later this week. Zul'Aman tomorrow, Zul'Aman lore rant this week. I'm going to be doing this zone, following through. What is Zul'Jan doing with the Lightwood? We're going to find out. Anyways, thank y'all for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.